Welcome to another video from Dr. Lock. Alright, we had a look at the dormer, the carber, the Lockwood 3582. Now we're going to have a look at another Lockwood 3582. This one's going to be easier to work out what's actually happened than the other one. The other one was a bit of a mystery, couldn't work it out, but we could clearly say that things inside weren't working. So I'll take you over this one here. This one here is different to the other one. It doesn't have your handing on the back, and it uses a different type of cam. It has this little indicator down the front, lockable and escape, so that way you can actually set up which side you want to be which. So let's see if we can simulate that. No, can't. It's probably because it's jammed up in there. Anti-lockout, press off, unlock to reset. So there's some sort of little thing to push backwards and forwards. Push backwards and forwards there as well. To be quite honest, I haven't worked a lot with this new lock yet, but we're going to have a look. Looks like the case is made out of die cast and it's some sort of stainless steel finish on the front. Patent pending, Lockwood Asa alloy, all the usuals. Oh, there we go. Also the casing here is bowed and buckled. I haven't been a fan of this new Lockwood stuff since it's come out because they're starting to use different cams now, which is a bit of a nightmare. And also some of the cams on the older design, when they had the one cam does all, it really didn't work too well. I do like the ability to change the lock function, not have to use different cams, but it just really didn't work on some of the doors where they needed more pressure to pull the latch back. The cams just seem to die out and die and fall apart real quick. Alright, so here's the lock itself. I've removed the stainless plate, and for some reason they've put this plate on top. I mean, it's very unusual, you know, especially when they're sending all the locks to China to be made. It's very unusual they're using excess plates which are not necessary, or out of stainless. I would have expected it to be plastic or die cast, but they did. I can see the bolts being ground down a little bit there, but that's outside the lock, and I can see it's puffed up here. So I'm not too sure why or what has gone on with this, but I thought we could pop it open and have a look. Before we do, let's have a look at this little function here. So this one here, you can push it up, you can push it down, pivots backwards and forwards, and on the inside there it's moving this little lever up or down, which is connected to here. So this little funny shaped thing is coming through and most likely operating this one here, the slide up and down. So it's on the slide. Cool. That part we got worked out. Now automatically I can see something bent here, which shouldn't probably be bent, if you can see that, and it doesn't explain why the casing's all puffed out. So might just see what happens when we kind of pull this latch out. Ooh, a lot of springs everywhere. I'm not used to this configuration. So this is it's actually the first one I've pulled apart. Okay, so we've got a little floating part there. Anyone know what that thing does? I'm not sure if it's broken. It doesn't look broken, actually. It doesn't look broken. So that's going to be one of those little parts that give you a nightmare to get back in if you decide to pull one of these apart. And I must say, looking at the complexity of it, it's definitely one of those locks. They're preferring you don't pull it apart on a job in the middle of the night or anything like that, because it doesn't look friendly. Doesn't look friendly. That to me looks bent. And when I put it back in there, it doesn't look like a very good spot for the pickup of the lock. So it might actually be correct. Might actually be correct. But it just looks bent to me. Looks bent to me. Actually, yeah, it might be correct, because you will be picking the lock up from about this position. The cam is picked up here for the lock and unlock bar. Let's test the lock and unlock bar. Yes. It's the same as other locks. That slides up, that slides down. So lock and unlock the handles, slides this up. Very complex setup on the handles. I've got a spring there, a ball bearing there, a round turning thing here. So when I turn it here, it's going to go up and capture this little part here. Same on the other side. So this looks a lot different to any other setup they've done. I mean, I kind of do like the way you could just flick a little green switch on the front. I mean, that's handy, but it's not really, I don't know if it's worth recreating the wheel to bring all these parts into this type of lock, because then you got more things that can fail. And this is a brand new lock, and it's failed. And it was puffed out in the middle, which just creates the question, why? Why was it puffed out? You can see it there. If that's a straight edge, you can see there. Can you see it? You can see it's puffed out here. So this part here was actually wanting to push out. All I can think of is perhaps it ran off its runner, and somebody was pulling this section back with the handle because it has more leverage, and it's basically been enough to, well, this part here is made of that's mild steel, so it's a U-shaped cage, so that can have a fair bit of pressure. And this underneath part here is mild steel once again. I mean, look at the way it's all coming apart. They're all sort of pressed and fabricated parts. I mean, the quality's good. The quality's good. Mild steel, hardened bolt. But even just stripping it down with all these things here, I think I'd be spending a bit of time trying to get this back together if I wanted to. And here's a die cast part. This die cast part holds a spring on this side here. Doesn't look like it's any part with pressure on it or anything. But yeah, that's actually a strong part. That's the part that's going to be manipulated by the cylinder to pull the rest of the lock back, and that looks strong. If you compare it to some of the others, like the Carver and all, well, this one here looks a little bit thicker than the Carper one actually. And the Carper one, you can see that one bent. So yeah, complicated. Yeah, I mean, we've got bolts, dead latch or secondary latch, a die cast thing, several springs, a part I couldn't even try and identify. It's got a number on it, so let's call that the number 2 part. Here's the number 2 part. The rest of the housing doesn't look too complicated. There was a ball bearing located up the top there, so once again there's its position there, from there to there, and it would sit up there. So once again, that's another thing that's just going to go flying when you try and take this off on a job. I mean, once you've done it a few times, it wouldn't be an issue, but it doesn't look extremely friendly. When I'm moving the lock and unlock bar there, you can see what's happening underneath. It's actually triggering into the thing. Here's another little part. Let's call this 041, because that's what's written on it, 041. Another spring. We have a spring down here as well, and this is the type of stuff we're talking about on this lock. I mean, it's really cool to have the lock and unlock function with a little turn snib on the front, but I don't know if it's worth all this extra effort they've gone to manufacture all these little tiny parts. And I don't like it because a locksmith on a job, or an apprentice, or somebody who's never pulled one apart is going to really struggle to pull this apart, and I think it's just overcomplicated, to be honest with you. I mean, it looks good, but let's keep digging in. As far as why the actual problem this lock failed, I'm going to put that down to unknown once again, because it was puffed out at this point right here. So something to do with the latch. Maybe the latch was just hitting way too hard. It might have been hitting something, and it's just pushed on the case, set it out of alignment. As you can see, the alignment, it's got these runners here, so if you introduce a gap there and things, it can kink out and not slide properly. So I think that could have been the issue. The ramp on the, well, here's another one. The ramp on the actual bolt, somebody's hit it with a bit of a grinder. They haven't done much to it. They haven't really even changed the shape of it. So it might have actually been just hitting an odd shape here and not being able to ride that ramp to penetrate back. Having a big enough, strong enough door when this is hit like this, what would that do? That would push most likely on this section here. So if you've got that there, that lines up perfectly. So we could say excessive slamming on a part of the lock which was not properly ramped, hitting right here, puffing this section out, not allowing it to slide on its proper rails, or kink, or get crusty, or be hard when turning the key. That's my best guess. And if you think I'm wrong, put it in the description down below, and let's see how many more springs we can get off this bad boy here. There's another one here pushing the handle the handle part down. There's another one there. So that's what that's our handles there, and this big question mark type thing is what's going to drive this latch. So a latch is going to sit in there, it's going to drive one, and it's going to pull it back. This big question mark, very similar to the other locks. There's nothing too bad there. That's spring loaded, that doesn't look too bad. That looks like it can go back in. One of the few parts that don't look too bad. Let's strip the hubs. There's one hub, one driver, secondary hub, nicely lubricated too, nothing really happening there. Okay, and this should just pull straight out now. This is our slide bar, and just when you think, you know, it's complicated enough, they've gone and made this a two-part. So look at that, two-part. So now somebody has to put them together. Instead of being a one-part, it's two-part, made out of steel and die-cast. Die-cast here, steel here, slide backwards, forwards, and it's got a little notchy bit there, not very big there. I mean, that looks like it could play up at one stage. Being die-cast here as well, so that's basically what's operating the lock through the cylinder. So I don't know if that's going to really work. I reckon that's going to play up. You see this little part right here? They could have made it out of steel, but it's actually made out of die-cast. And I've seen the other previous model where if it's not, you know, made out of steel, when you've got a big door and you're pulling this back with a lot of pressure and it's from the key cylinder, generally they play up about there. So my psychic ability is telling me that that part there is under-engineered, in my opinion. Still digging. I mean, I think I can strip this thing down into over 100 parts. That's how many parts are in this. There's another little part. It's a wishbone, or a funny shaped rotor. I don't know. Oop. There's another little part. And on the other side, we've got another little wishbone. Want more? It's like an infomercial. Want more? Of course we got more. We've got another spring and a ball bearing. I really should have counted the parts on this because I think we'd be up to 100. Here's our little indicator lock and unlock part. Look at the engineering of that. Look at that. Right? It's circular with a circular back with indentations for ball bearings with an offset and different divots on each side. It's marked number 1, and we also have to include that side. You want a bit of colour in there and you want a thing to stick your screwdriver in there. So look at that part. It's a lot of work to make a part like that. Made out of die cast, of course, but it's an interesting piece. I'd like to know what the technical name for that thing is. And then we have this piece underneath here, which I know what the last piece did, but this piece I got no idea on. Come on out. There we go. Made out die cast as well. Slide. Okay, I think I've worked it out. When this rotates, this moves back and forth on the slide. Here's the slide. I'll remove that spring. Okay. So this part goes in here. This is where the money shot is. This moves backwards and forwards, allowing these hubs to be what they want to be. And do we have a secondary on top? We do. Look at that. So there's its cousin or its brother to another mother. That's going to sit on top like there. Basically they have the same V shape to allow the drop in or not the drop in, and that is what controls our handing. So this one here is on a slide and this other one just sits on top of it, and it's basically guided by everything else. So that's what that does. And this thing here, when rotated, should allow these parts to move. Yep. Maybe I've got that in the wrong spot to start with. Anyway, you get the idea. So that's the new Lockwood 3582 with indicator on the front. Taking those new cams. It's a really new lock actually. It's a really new lock. So it's good to actually have a look at that. First time I've ever pulled one apart. And yeah, it's a new lock, and we've already seen one fail. And here's another thing too. You see this? This is a piece of what looks to be stainless. Let's pop that out again. There you go, piece of stainless. So just to put that runner in to keep everything slide, obviously that's to help this slide. They've done it like that, so it's like a little shim that goes in there. Maybe that was an afterthought because you know, it's a lot of engineering just to cut out the front, recess it in the front, and then recess it here. And then after you've done all of that, they've gone and had to put a stainless plate over the top with two little dots there. And the dots are for something too. Yeah, the dots are for something. They're for that little part that slid up and down, the little where are we? They're for that to lock into. Yep, there we are there, the number 3. Was it the number 3? Yeah, the number 3. So we got probably a little like braille thing there, pick up here. So obviously when this lock has been pushed out of formation, this is going to stop working too, because the lock has been pushed out here, which basically means that these two little dimples are not going to sit in here, or they're not going to operate properly if there's a big bow in the middle of the lock. But I guess most of them don't have a big bow in the middle lock. This is just a once-off. Anyway, that's the new Lockwood 3582. And if you know about the parts more than I do, or if you know anything more about it, or if you've tried to put one apart on a job, or if you've got one in the back of your van floating around in a million pieces like this one, and you want to comment, please do so below. Thanks for watching.